Heartbreaking. He humiliated his pregnant wife at a party. Seconds later, her Korean Mafia ex-husband arrived. The champagne glasses clinked with false cheer as Sophie stood frozen in the center of the marble ballroom, her husband Marcus's words still hanging in the air like poison. Her hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly. 6 months pregnant with twins, as 200 pairs of eyes bore into her, with a mixture of pity and voyeuristic fascination. Maybe if you actually took care of yourself, Sophie, you wouldn't look like a beached whale at my company's anniversary gala, Marcus had announced loudly, his arm draped around his secretary Jennifer's waist. I mean, look at Jennifer here. She knows how to maintain herself. That's a real woman. The hurt that exploded through Sophie's chest was so profound, so utterly devastating, that for a moment she couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred with tears. She refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people who already whispered about her behind their hands. The gorgeous emerald gown she'd spent weeks finding, the one that made her feel beautiful despite her changing body, suddenly felt like a costume, like she was playing dress-up in a life that no longer wanted her. Marcus had been different once. Or had he? Sophie couldn't remember anymore. The man who'd swept her off her feet 2 years ago, who'd promised her the world, who convinced her to leave behind everything she knew. Had that man ever really existed? Or had she been so desperate to escape her past that she'd painted him in colors he never possessed? Her past. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, even now. "Excuse me," Sophie whispered to no one in particular, turning toward the French doors that led to the garden. She needed air. She needed to think. She needed to figure out how her life had crumbled so completely. The cool October air hit her face as she stumbled onto the terrace, her heels clicking against the stone. Behind her, she could hear the party continuing, Marcus's laughter rising above the others. He wasn't following her. He never did anymore. The humiliation had been the point, the spectacle he'd wanted to create. Sophie gripped the marble balustrade, her knuckles white. When had it started? When had Marcus's loving touches become rough and dismissive? When had his compliments turned to criticisms? When had she become so small in his eyes? "You're shaking." The voice came from behind her, deep and achingly familiar, speaking in Korean-accented English that sent her heart into a violent staccato. No, it couldn't be. Not here. Not now. Not after 5 years of silence. Sophie turned slowly, and the world tilted on its axis. Jae-sung stood in the shadows of the terrace, dressed in an immaculate black suit that probably cost more than her car. His dark hair was styled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face, a face she'd once traced with trembling fingers, a face she'd seen in her dreams for years. But it was his eyes that destroyed her, those impossibly dark eyes that had once looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. Those same eyes now burned with something dangerous. "Jay," she breathed, the name catching her throat like broken glass. He stepped into the light, and Sophie saw what 5 years had done to him. He'd always been handsome, but there was a hardness to him now, a lethal grace in the way he moved that spoke of violence and power. The boy she'd loved had become a man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. "You shouldn't be here," Sophie managed, though her voice wavered. "How did you even find you?" Jae-sung's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Sophie, did you really think I ever stopped looking? That I ever stopped caring?" The last word came out rough, almost broken, and it shattered something inside her. She'd left him without explanation 5 years ago, disappeared in the middle of the night with nothing but a note that said she couldn't be part of his world anymore. She'd been 23 and terrified, caught between loving him desperately and fearing the darkness that surrounded him, the family business that dealt in things she couldn't reconcile with the gentle man who'd held her while she cried. "You need to leave," Sophie said, but there was no conviction in it. "My husband—" "Your husband," Jae-sung interrupted, his voice dropping to something deadly quiet, "just humiliated you in front of 200 people. Your husband touched another woman in front of his pregnant wife. Your husband—" He stopped, his jaw clenching so hard she could see the muscle jump. "That's not a husband. That's not even a man." Tears finally spilled down Sophie's cheeks, hot and unstoppable. "You don't understand. It's complicated. I can't just—" can't what? Leave him? Choose better? Jae-sung took a step closer, and Sophie's breath caught. Even after all these years, her body remembered him, responded to his proximity, with a longing so intense it was almost painful. You left me because you said my world was too dangerous. But look at where you ended up, Sophie. Look at what he's done to the light in your eyes. That's not fair, Sophie whispered. Your family is... The Korean Mafia, Jae-sung finished bluntly. Yes, I've never hidden what I am, what my responsibilities are, but I never made you feel small. I never broke you down piece by piece until you question your own worth. His words cut through her defenses like a knife through silk. Because he was right. For all the danger that had surrounded Jae-sung, for all the violence that lurked at the edges of his world, he had treated her like she was precious. He had loved her with an intensity that had both thrilled and terrified her. Why are you here? Sophie asked, wrapping her arms around herself. After all this time, why now? Jae-sung's expression softened just a fraction. I've been watching over you, even when you didn't know it. Making sure you were safe, even though it killed me to see you with him. I told myself that if you were happy, I could live with it. But you're not happy, Sophie. You haven't been happy for a long time. How would you know? Because I know you, he said simply. I know that you bite your lower lip when you're anxious. I know that you twist your wedding ring when you're lying to yourself. I know that when you're truly happy, you have this little laugh like music. And I haven't seen that smile, haven't heard that laugh in years. Sophie's hand moved unconsciously to her wedding ring, and Jae-sung's eyes tracked the movement. She forced herself to stop, to drop her hand. I'm pregnant, she said, as if that explained everything. As if that justified staying in a marriage that was slowly suffocating her. I know. Jae-sung's eyes dropped to her belly, and something complex crossed his face. Longing, regret, determination. Twins. Girls. She gaped at him. How could you possibly? I told you. I've been watching, making sure you're safe. He took another step closer, close enough now that she could smell his cologne, that familiar scent that brought back 1,000 memories. Do you know what it's been like? Watching him treat you like you're nothing when you're everything? Seeing him parade his mistress around while you carry his children? It's taken every ounce of self-control I have not to... He cut himself off, his hands clenching into fists. Not to what? Sophie challenged, though her voice shook. Not to do what you do? Not to use violence? That's exactly why I left, Jae-sung. I couldn't live in that world. I couldn't be the wife of a man who would burn down the world to keep you safe. Jae-sung's voice was rough now, raw with emotion. Who would kill anyone who tried to hurt you? Yes, Sophie, that's exactly what I am. I've never pretended to be anything else. But at least I'm honest about it. Your Marcus, though, he wears a suit and runs a legitimate business. But he's cruel in ways I never was. He's destroying you slowly, and there's nothing honorable about that. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. Marcus's cruelty was insidious, subtle enough that she started to believe his criticisms, to internalize his contempt. He'd isolated her from her friends, from her family, making her dependent on him while simultaneously making her feel worthless. I don't know what to do, Sophie whispered, and it was perhaps the most honest thing she'd said in years. I'm pregnant. I'm trapped. I have nowhere to go. You have me. The words hung in the air between them, laden with promise and impossibility. I can't. Sophie started, but Jae-sung reached out, his fingers gently tilting her chin up until she met his eyes. You can, he said softly. You don't have to decide anything tonight. But know this, you are not trapped. You are not alone. And you are not the worthless thing he's tried to make you believe you are. A sound from inside made them both turn. Through the French doors, Sophie could see Marcus searching the ballroom, his expression annoyed, looking for her, probably, not because he cared, but because her absence reflected poorly on him. I should go back, Sophie said automatically, the well-trained response of someone who'd learned to minimize conflict. Jae-sung's hand fell away from her face. Should you? Or do you feel like you have to? The distinction gutted her, because she knew the answer. She lost track of the things she wanted, the things that brought her joy. Her entire existence had become about managing Marcus's moods, about making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. "What would you have me do?" Sophie asked, and there was a desperation in her voice that made her cringe. "Run away with you? Pretend the last 5 years didn't happen? I have responsibilities. I'm going to be a mother. And those babies deserve a mother who knows her worth," Jae-sung said quietly. "They deserve to grow up seeing strength, not watching their mother be diminished. What kind of life are you giving them if you stay with a man who treats you with contempt?" The question struck at the heart of Sophie's deepest fear. She'd been raised by a mother who stayed in a loveless marriage, who taught Sophie that a woman's value came from enduring, from sacrificing. She'd sworn she'd never repeat that pattern, yet here she was. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I know," Jae-sung said, "but you're also the bravest person I've ever known. You left me because you had the courage to walk away from something that didn't align with your values, even though it broke both our hearts. You have that same courage now. You just have to remember it." Before Sophie could respond, the French doors burst open. Marcus stood silhouetted in the doorway, his face flushed with alcohol and anger. "There you are," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made Sophie's stomach clench with anxiety. "I've been looking everywhere for," he stopped, his eyes landing on Jae-sung. "Who the hell are you?" Jae-sung turned slowly, and Sophie watched Marcus's expression shift from anger to something else. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. There was something about Jae-sung's stillness that radiated danger, a predatory quality that made smart people take a step back. Marcus, unfortunately, had never been particularly smart when his ego was involved. "I asked you a question," Marcus said, puffing up his chest. "This is a private event. If you're not invited—" "I'm an old friend of Sophie's," Jae-sung said, his voice perfectly polite and absolutely lethal. "We were just catching up." Marcus's eyes narrowed, flicking between them. Sophie could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the possessive anger that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with ownership. "Sophie, get inside," Marcus commanded, not even looking at her. "We need to talk about your little disappearing act. It's embarrassing." Sophie felt herself starting to move automatically, her body trained to obey to avoid conflict. But then Jae-sung's hand brushed hers, the lightest touch, and she stopped. "Actually," Sophie heard herself say, her voice stronger than she expected, "I think I'd like to stay out here a bit longer. The fresh air is helping with the nausea." Marcus's face darkened. "I wasn't asking, Sophie. Get inside. Now." She said no. Jae-sung's words were soft, but they cut through the air like a blade. He hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, but suddenly the atmosphere on the terrace shifted into something dangerous. Marcus let out a harsh laugh. "I'm sorry. Who do you think you are? This is my wife. And if she wants to stay at my company's event, she'll do what I tell her to." "Your wife," Jae-sung interrupted, and now there was steel in his voice, "is a person, not a possession." She expressed a preference. "You should respect it." "Respect." Marcus's voice rose. "You're going to lecture me about respect? Some uninvited guest who's hitting on a married woman—" "I'm not hitting on anyone," Jae-sung said calmly. "I'm simply reminding you that Sophie has agency. Something you seem to have forgotten." Sophie watched in horror and a strange, terrible fascination as Marcus took a step toward Jae-sung. Her husband might have been tall and reasonably fit, but Jae-sung existed in a different category entirely. It was the difference between someone who went to the gym occasionally and someone who trained their body as a weapon. "Marcus, please," Sophie said, moving between them. "Just go back inside. I'll be there in a minute." "Oh, so now you're defending the stranger?" Marcus's anger found a new target, and Sophie flinched despite herself. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're embarrassing me. Sophie, you show up looking like—" He didn't get to finish the sentence because suddenly Jae-sung was there, his hand wrapped around Marcus's wrist with a grip that made Sophie's husband gasp. "Choose your next words very carefully," Jae-sung said, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "Because Sophie is pregnant. She's carrying your children. And if you say one more cruel thing to her, One more word that makes her flinch. I will forget every promise I made to myself about staying away. Are you threatening me? Marcus tried to yank his arm back, but Jae-sung's grip didn't budge. Do you have any idea who I am? I'll call security. I'll have you arrested. Please do, Jae-sung said. Call them. I'd love to have a conversation about how you treat your wife. I'm sure the society pages would find it fascinating. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. The realization that the stranger somehow knew things, had information that could damage the carefully cultivated image Marcus had built. Sophie saw her husband's expression cycle through anger, calculation, and finally a kind of cold cunning. Sophie, Marcus said, his voice forcibly calm now. This man is clearly unstable. Come inside with me. We'll call security and have him removed. It was a test, Sophie realized, a way for Marcus to reassert control, to make her choose him in front of this stranger. And the old Sophie, the one who'd been worn down by 2 years of constant criticism, might have complied. But something had shifted in the last few minutes. Seeing Jae-sung again, being reminded of a time when she'd been loved fiercely and protectively, had awakened something in her that she thought was dead. No, Sophie said quietly. The single word seemed to echo in the silence. Marcus stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. What did you just say? I said no. Sophie's voice was stronger now, even as her hands trembled. I'm not going inside. And Jae-sung isn't unstable. He's been more respectful in 5 minutes than you've been in months. Jae-sung? Marcus's eyes widened with recognition. Wait, Jae-sung? As in your ex? The one you said was... He stopped, but Sophie knew what he'd been about to say. The one you said was dangerous. The one you said you were afraid of. I was never afraid of him, Sophie said, and realized it was true. She'd been afraid of his world, of the violence that surrounded him, but never of Jae-sung himself. I was afraid of what loving him would cost me, but I was wrong about what I should have been afraid of. Sophie, you're being hysterical, Marcus said, switching tactics. The pregnancy hormones are making you emotional. Let's go inside, have some water, and discuss this rationally. It was so perfectly Marcus, dismissing her feelings, pathologizing her completely reasonable anger, making about her instability rather than his behavior. How many times had he done this? How many times had she believed him when he said she was overreacting, being too sensitive, imagining things? I'm not hysterical, Sophie said. I'm clear-headed for first time in years. Jae-sung had released Marcus's wrist and stepped back, giving Sophie space but staying close enough that she could feel his silent support. He wasn't fighting her battles for her, wasn't trying to rescue her like she was some damsel in distress. He was simply there, believing in her strength, even when she'd forgotten herself. Fine, Marcus said, his voice turning cold. Stay out here with your ex, make a fool of yourself. But don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you're making. He turned to leave, then paused. And Sophie, when you come to your senses, we're going to have a very long conversation about appropriate behavior and loyalty. Your little rebellion, it's going to have consequences. The threat hung in the air, and Sophie felt the familiar fear trying to claw its way up her throat. But before it could take hold, Jae-sung spoke. Marcus. The name was spoken softly, but Marcus froze like Jae-sung had fired a shot. You should know something. Sophie might have left my world, but she never stopped being under my protection. I let her go because she asked me to, because I loved her enough to want her happiness, even if it wasn't with me. But threatening her? That ends now. Marcus turned, his face pale. Are you? I'm not threatening you, Jae-sung said calmly. I'm informing you of a fact. Sophie is under my protection. Her children are under my protection. And if anything happens to her, if she suffers so much as a bruise, if she's made to cry one more tear because of you... He paused, letting the implication hang. Well, let's just say it will be very unfortunate. Sophie had seen Jae-sung angry before, had seen him in the grip of the cold fury that made other men back down. But this was different. This was the voice of someone who commanded an empire, who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives. This was the man his enemies feared. And watching her soft-spoken, mild-mannered husband blanch in the face of that power, Sophie felt something she hadn't expected. Relief. "You can't just, this is insane," Marcus sputtered. "Sophie, are you hearing this? He's threatening me." "He's protecting me," Sophie corrected quietly. "Something you stopped doing a long time ago." Marcus looked between them, and Sophie could see the moment he realized he'd lost. Not the fight. He could still cause problems, could make things difficult. But he'd lost the power he'd held over her, the control that came from making her believe she had no other options. "This isn't over," Marcus said, pointing at Sophie. "You're my wife. Those are my children. You think you can just walk away? We'll see what my lawyers have to say about that." "I'll look forward to it," Jae-sung said. "I'm sure they'll be very interested in the prenuptial agreement that's heavily weighted in your favor, and the financial irregularities in your company, and the mistress on the payroll. Should make for a fascinating discovery process." Sophie's eyes widened. How did he know about the prenup? About Jennifer being on the company payroll? How long had he been watching, gathering information? Marcus's face went from pale to red. "You have no idea what you're getting into. I have connections. I have power." "So do I," Jae-sung said simply. "The difference is, mine are scarier than yours." It wasn't a boast. It was just a fact, delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that couldn't be faked. And Marcus, for all his bluster, was smart enough to recognize when he was outmatched. "We're not done," Marcus said to Sophie, his voice shaking with rage. "You'll regret this." Then he turned and stalked back into the ballroom, leaving Sophie alone on the terrace with Jae-sung and the wreckage of her marriage. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Sophie's mind was reeling, trying to process everything that had just happened. She defied Marcus. She'd stood up for herself, and she'd done it in front of the ex-husband she'd never stopped loving, if she was being completely honest with herself. "Are you okay?" Jae-sung asked gently. Sophie let out a laugh that was half-sob. I don't know what I am." She sank down onto the stone bench that lined the terrace, her legs suddenly unable to support her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving her shaky and overwhelmed. Jae-sung sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "You were incredible." "I was terrified," Sophie admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Jae-sung said. "It's acting despite it. And you just stood up to a man who's been tearing you down for years. That takes incredible strength." Sophie looked down at her hands, at the ostentatious diamond ring that suddenly felt like a shackle. "What happens now?" "He's right. I'm his wife. Legally, financially, I'm tied to him. And with the babies coming. Now," Jae-sung said carefully, "you make choices. Real choices, not the ones fear or obligation dictate. What do you want, Sophie? If you could have anything, what would you choose?" It was such a simple question, but Sophie couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked her what she wanted. Marcus certainly never did. He told her what to wear, what to eat, where to go, who to see. He'd systematically eliminated her agency until she'd forgotten she had any. "I want," Sophie started, then stopped. Did she even know anymore? "I want to feel safe. I want my babies to grow up seeing love, not contempt. I want to remember who I was before I became so small." "You were never small," Jae-sung said fiercely. "He made you feel small. But you're the same woman who worked 2 jobs to put herself through college. The same woman who started her own graphic design business from nothing. The same woman who learned Korean just to better understand my grandmother. You didn't lose yourself, Sophie. You just got buried under someone else's cruelty." Tears spilled down Sophie's cheeks again, but these were different. These weren't tears of humiliation or despair. These were the tears of someone grieving for lost time, for the years she'd spent doubting herself. "I don't know how to get out," she whispered. "The prenup, Marcus made sure I'd have nothing if we divorced. And I gave up my business when we got married. He said it was impractical, that I should focus on being a proper wife. I have no income, no savings separate from his. I'm completely dependent on him." "No, you're not." Jae-sung pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then showed her the screen. It was a bank statement with Sophie's name on it. The balance made her gasp. "What is this?" "Your business," Jae-sung said. Sophie Designs. I bought it from you when you sold it, but I never shut it down. I hired someone to run it, to grow it. All the profits have been going into an account in your name. It's yours, Sophie. It's always been yours. Sophie stared at the numbers, her mind struggling to comprehend. Her business, the one she loved, that she'd been so proud of, the one Marcus had convinced her to sell, saying it was a waste of time, that real wives didn't work. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? Because I knew you might need it someday. Jae-sung said simply, because even though you left, even though it destroyed me, I wanted you to have options. I wanted you to be free to choose your own life, always. The enormity of what he'd done, maintaining her business for 5 years, giving her financial independence she didn't even know she had, overwhelmed her. This was love, she realized, not the possessive, controlling thing Marcus called love. This was wanting someone to be whole and free, even if it meant they might not choose you. Jae-sung, Sophie's voice broke. I don't deserve this. I left you. I broke your heart. You did what you needed to do to feel safe. Jae-sung interrupted. And I never blamed you for that. My world is dangerous. Sophie, you weren't wrong to be afraid of it. You just deserved a better alternative than what you found. Sophie touched her belly, feeling the twins moving. What kind of life can I give them? If I leave Marcus, it won't be quiet. He'll make it ugly. And if I come back to you... She couldn't finish the sentence. Then they'll have a mother who knows her worth, Jae-sung said, and a protector who will burn the world down to keep them safe. Is that perfect? No. Is it what you dreamed of when you imagined having children? Probably not. But it's real, Sophie. It's honest. And it's infinitely better than watching their mother slowly disappear. A commotion inside the ballroom drew their attention. Through the windows, Sophie could see Marcus talking animatedly to several men in suits. Security, she realized. He was making good on his threat to have Jae-sung removed. You should go, Sophie said quickly. He's calling security. There's going to be a scene. Let there be a scene, Jae-sung said calmly. I'm not leaving you alone with him. I'll be fine. There are people here. He won't. Sophie stopped because she didn't actually know what Marcus would or wouldn't do anymore. The man who'd humiliated her in front of 200 people, who'd paraded his mistress around while his pregnant wife watched. What was that man capable of? The French doors burst open again, this time with Marcus and 3 large security guards. That's him, Marcus said, pointing at Jae-sung. I want him removed from the property. He's threatening my wife. The security guards approached cautiously. They might have been hired muscle, but they weren't stupid. Something about Jae-sung's stillness made them wary. Sir, you'll need to come with us, the lead guard said. Jae-sung stood slowly, his movements deliberate. Of course. I wouldn't want to cause a scene at such a lovely party. His eyes met Sophie's. But I'll be right outside if you need me. Just say the word. She won't need you, Marcus snapped. Sophie, get up. We're leaving. Sophie didn't move. She sat on that stone bench, her hands on her belly, and looked at her husband. Really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time in months. He was handsome, successful, charismatic when he wanted to be. But his eyes were cold, and there was a cruelty in the set of his mouth that she'd learned to read, to predict, to fear, when had fear become the primary emotion in her marriage. Sophie, Marcus's voice was sharp. I said get up, now. The guards were escorting Jae-sung toward the ballroom, but he paused, looking back at her. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Sophie saw everything he wasn't saying, that she had choices, that she had worth, that she was loved, even if she couldn't accept that love right now. And she saw something else too, a promise, that whatever she decided, wherever she went, she wouldn't be alone. No, Sophie said quietly. Marcus froze. What? No, Sophie repeated, louder this time. She stood up, her hand still cradling her belly. I'm not going home with you tonight, Marcus. I need time to think. Think about what? Marcus's voice rose. You're my wife. You don't get to just... I get to do whatever I want. Sophie interrupted, and the words felt like breaking chains. I'm a person. I have rights. And I'm exercising them. I'm leaving. You're not going anywhere, Marcus said, moving to block her path. You're being hysterical, emotional. You need to calm down and think rationally about what you're doing. I am thinking rationally, Sophie said, for the first time in years. And I'm leaving. Tonight. Right now. Marcus grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. You're not. He didn't finish the sentence because suddenly Jae-sung was there, having broken away from the security guards. He didn't touch Marcus, didn't make any overtly threatening moves. He simply positioned himself between them, and his presence was enough to make Marcus release Sophie's arm. You should take your hand off her, Jae-sung said, his voice deadly quiet. Before I forget that we're in a room full of witnesses. The security guards rushed forward, but Jae-sung raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm not being aggressive. I'm simply protecting a pregnant woman who was being grabbed. You all saw it, didn't you? The guards exchanged glances. They had seen it, and whatever Marcus paid them. It probably wasn't enough to lie about assaulting a pregnant woman. Sir, the lead guard said to Marcus, maybe we should all just take a breath and get him out of here. Marcus shouted, and someone bring my car around. Sophie and I are leaving. I already called a car, Jae-sung said calmly. For Sophie, it's waiting at the front entrance. She can leave whenever she's ready. Marcus's face was purple with rage now. You can't just, this is kidnapping. Sophie, if you leave with him, I'll have him arrested. I'm not leaving with him, Sophie said. I'm just leaving. Where I go is my business. But I'm not staying here, and I'm not going home with you. She started walking toward the ballroom, toward the front entrance. Her legs were shaking, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, away from Marcus, away from the life that had been slowly killing her. Sophie, Marcus's voice was desperate now. You can't do this. What about the babies? What about our life? What about everything I've given you? Sophie paused, turning back to look at him, in the light from the ballroom. With 200 guests now crowding around the windows to watch the spectacle, Marcus looked smaller somehow, less imposing. Just a man who'd wielded cruelty as a weapon and was now finding that weapon turn against him. You didn't give me a life, Sophie said quietly. You gave me a cage, and I'm done living in it. She walked through the ballroom, past the gawking guests, past Jennifer, who was clutching her champagne glass with white knuckles, past the life she tried to build on a foundation of fear and settling. Jae-sung was beside her, not touching, just present. The security guard had fallen back, apparently deciding that a pregnant woman leaving a party wasn't worth whatever hassle Marcus was promising. At the front entrance, a sleek black car was indeed waiting. The driver, an older Korean man who Sophie vaguely remembered from years ago, bowed respectfully. Mrs. Sophie, he said in Korean, it's good to see you again. Thank you, Mr. Kim, Sophie replied in the same language, surprising herself. How much had she buried? How many pieces of herself had she locked away to become Marcus's version of an acceptable wife? Jae-sung opened the car door for her, and Sophie hesitated. Once she got in this car, once she drove away, there was no going back. Marcus would make good on his threats. Her life, as she knew it, would be over. But then again, what life did she really have? What was she preserving by staying? You don't have to decide anything tonight, Jae-sung said softly, reading her hesitation. The car can take you wherever you want to go. A hotel, a friend's house. My apartment has a guest room if you want privacy. Or back home if you change your mind. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. Even if I choose to go back to him. Jae-sung's expression was pained, but he nodded. Even then, though I'd ask that you at least think about it overnight first. Make the decision when you're calm, not when you're reacting. Sophie looked back at the grand house, at the party still in full swing despite the drama. Through the windows, she could see Marcus gesticulating wildly, probably already spinning the story to make himself the victim, to make her the irrational, hormonal pregnant woman who embarrassed him. She thought about going back to that, about apologizing. smoothing things over, making herself smaller to fit into the space Marcus allowed her. About raising her daughters in a house where their mother had no voice, no power, no joy. And she knew she couldn't do it. "Take me to your guest room," Sophie said quietly, sliding into the car. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow I'll figure out what comes next." Jae-sung's relief was visible, though he tried to hide it. "Of course." He started to close the door, but Sophie caught his hand. "Jae-sung, thank you for everything, for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." He squeezed her hand gently. "I could never give up on you, Sophie. You're the love of my life. That doesn't just go away because time passes." Then he closed the door and walked around to get on the other side. Mr. Kim pulled away from the curb, and Sophie watched through the rear window as the grand house and her old life receded into the distance. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking. But underneath the fear was something else, something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Hope. The drive to Jae-sung's apartment was quiet. Sophie stared out the window at the city lights, her mind whirling. What had she just done? What would Marcus do in retaliation? How would she support herself and 2 babies? Would the prenup really leave her with nothing? "Stop," Jae-sung said gently. Sophie turned to look at him. "Stop what?" "Spiraling. I can practically hear your thoughts from here." He shifted in his seat to face her. "Nothing has to be decided tonight, Sophie. For now, you're safe. That's enough." "Is it?" Sophie's voice cracked. "I just blew up my entire life in front of 200 people. Marcus will do what he's going to do regardless," Jae-sung interrupted. "But you're not alone in this. You have resources now, your business, your savings. You have legal options. And you have people who care about you and will help." "People like you?" Sophie asked. "Your family?" "Jae-sung, I left your world because I couldn't handle the violence, the danger. If I come back to it, even just for protection, what kind of example does that set for my daughters?" Jae-sung was quiet for a long moment. "You're right," he finally said. "My world isn't safe. It's not the environment I'd choose for children. But Sophie, there's a difference between choosing danger and accepting protection when you need it. You don't have to be part of my family business to let me help you. Can those things really be separated?" Sophie asked. "If someone wanted to hurt you, to get to you, wouldn't they?" She stopped, her hand moving protectively to her belly. Understanding dawned in Jae-sung's eyes. "You're afraid that being near me puts the babies at risk, doesn't it?" Sophie whispered. "You have enemies. People would love to hurt you by hurting someone you care about. If they knew about me, about the twins." "They already know," Jae-sung said quietly. "Sophie, I told you, I've been watching over you for 5 years. My enemies know you exist. They know I care about you. But they also know that touching you would mean war. The kind of war that nobody wants to start." Sophie absorbed this information, feeling sick. "So I've been in danger this whole time? And I didn't even know it?" "You've been protected this whole time," Jae-sung corrected. "There's a difference. Did you ever wonder why the break-in at your house 2 years ago was resolved so quickly? Or why that drunk driver who sideswiped your car mysteriously left town the next day? Or why—" "Stop," Sophie said, holding up a hand. "Just stop. I can't process this right now. You're telling me you've been puppet master in my life for 5 years. "No," Jae-sung said firmly. "I've been keeping you safe. I didn't interfere with your choices, didn't try to sabotage your marriage or manipulate your life. I just made sure that the dangers that exist in the shadows didn't touch you. That's all." The car pulled up in front of a sleek high-rise building. Mr. Kim came around to open Sophie's door, and she stepped out into the cool night air. Her feet hurt from the heels she'd been wearing for hours, and her back ached from the weight of the twins. She was exhausted, emotionally run out, and completely overwhelmed. "Come on," Jae-sung said gently, offering his arm. "Let's get you upstairs. You need rest." Sophie let him guide her into the building, through a lobby that was all marble and glass, into a private elevator that required a key card to access. The kind of building where privacy and security were paramount. The kind of building where someone like Jae-sung would live. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment, and Sophie caught her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights twinkling like stars. The decor was minimalist but warm, all clean lines and natural materials. It was beautiful in a way that felt lived in, not staged. "The guest room is this way," Jae-sung said, leading her down a hallway. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own attached bathroom. "There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. I had some things brought in when I thought you might need them." Sophie walked into the room, her eyes stinging with fresh tears. On the bed was a comfortable-looking nightgown in her size. In the bathroom, she could see toiletries, her preferred brands, she realized, her favorite lavender lotion, the specific prenatal vitamins she took. "How did you know all this?" she asked. Jae-sung looked almost embarrassed. "I pay attention. I always have." Sophie sat down on the edge of the bed, suddenly so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard, leaving her feeling wrung out and shaky. "Get some rest," Jae-sung said from the doorway. "We can talk more in the morning. But Sophie, you're safe here. I promise you that. Whatever happens next, whatever you decide, you're safe."